This is the SEO Mindset Podcast with your hosts, Sarah McDowell and Tazmin Suleiman. This podcast is for SEO professionals, and each week, with the help of our wonderful guests, we discuss the important stuff that actually affects our careers and progression, but sadly often doesn't get talked about. You know, the invaluable soft and interpersonal skills that are often taken for granted, such as the skills we need for listening, time management, communication, and more. We also talk about the big issues that affect us and our careers, such as burnout, imposter syndrome, self-belief, saying no, plus other big issues and obstacles. With this podcast, we want to share knowledge on topics that unlock our listeners' true potential and enhance not only their careers, but all parts of their lives. So, are you ready to prioritize your own personal growth and career development? Then let's crack on with this week's episode.
Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of the SEO Mindset Podcast. Today it is me and a wonderful guest, not me and Sarah as usually here, and we're talking about a really great topic, which is how managers can build a really great relationship with their team members. So although this is focused on what managers can do, I think it's worth everyone listening to it, because you will gain some really good advice and skills, even if you're not managing a team formally. When you are, leading a project or leading a particular campaign, it's really great advice. So before we dive in, just want to remind everyone of, if you're enjoying what Sarah and I do, then there are ways that you can support us. There is the usual donation, so buy me a coffee. The link is in the show notes. And then also, if you're on what used to be called Twitter, I don't know anybody who likes calling it X, but what was formerly Twitter, we are on there. Hook up, come and talk to us, tell us about what you enjoy, what you'd like us to create content on, and that would be lovely. The links are in the show notes, so just go and find them and click. But I'm really eager to talk to you about my guest. So today we're talking to Gabrio Linari, and he is the director of ROCK SEO, which is his own organization, and also a global SEO consultant for a vast number of clients. He lives in sunny Croatia. I've never been to Croatia, so I'm keen to hear a bit more about it. And he works with companies all around the world. Now, in addition to being extremely passionate about people, training individuals in SEO, and understanding the challenges that businesses face, which is what he'll be sharing his insights on today, I also wanted to tell you a little bit about the non-SEO Gabrio. So, and maybe he can tell us a little bit more about this as well. He follows somebody called Shaun T's insanity workout regime. And even though I don't know anything much about it, I'm pretty sure I wouldn't want to do it. He trains daily, which is brilliant. On a more leisurely front, he enjoys strolls with his canine companion, Rocky. He finds cleaning his car therapeutic, which I sort of get, because I get that therapy from cleaning my kitchen. And onto kitchen and cooking. In a previous life, he attended the prestigious Cordon Bleu Culinary Arts School and had a career as a chef. Gabrio, amazing. Welcome.
Thank you, Tazmin. Thank you for having me here.
So, tell me a bit about Shaun T. What's a normal workout?
Well, it's like a fitness trainer from the US, and he did many of these workouts with different, goals, etc. And a typical workout is like 45 minutes of a high intensity workout of different types. So, yeah, they can be quite challenging and intense. Yeah.
Yeah. Less or more intense than working in a kitchen?
Well, I would say it's a different ball game. I mean, on one, this one you have, is your own time. You can press pause, but in the kitchen you cannot press pause. Someone will be shouting at you, so less intense, I would say.
Is the shouting one of the reasons you decided that that wasn't for you, life as a chef?
Yeah, one of them, and I soon realized that that type of work, I mean, it's brilliant, and although I love cooking in general,
Mm.
you have to do it when you're a bit younger. I'm not
Yeah.
extremely old either, but I think when you're a bit younger, starting up, then you can appreciate I mean, you can tolerate, let's say, the shouting a bit better,
Yeah.
right? So yeah, it was a bit too much, but nevertheless, a great experience, and the training also was fun, I have to say.
Oh, wow. Okay, one more cooking question, then I'll move on to our
It's all
topic.
right.
Um, two two of your favorite things to cook, one Italian, one non-Italian.
Okay, Italian. It's been a long time. I'm not doing that one. Gnocchi, gnocchi,
Okay.
dumplings, potato stuff.
Yeah.
And non-Italian, there is this one called black bean chili quinoa. So it's a mix of these ingredients, and actually came from the training of the Shanti guy. And because
Yeah.
together with the trainings, I'm not endorsing anything, but they also have all the cooking meals together, and some are really, really delicious. So they have
Mhm.
nice meals also developed by a chef there. So yeah, these two are my go-to ones. But the gnocchi has been ages, and my wife doesn't like when I do gnocchi because everything gets so messy, with flour and stuff. So it's been a long time. I used to be good on
Oh.
that.
Oh, well, look, if you decide to make it this weekend, I'm not to blame for the mess in the kitchen. Just telling you this.
Fair enough.
Anyway, I'm really excited about talking to you on this topic because it's something that people have asked us to record more on. And it's about this role between a manager and their team members. And there's so many intricacies, and it's um, so amazing when it works right, and when it doesn't, it can lead to bad performance for the individuals and the organization, and not to mention all of the impacts it has on mental health of everyone involved. So, in your opinion, what are the main responsibilities a manager has towards their team members?
Great question. Yeah, and I think we can also differentiate a little bit between remote managers and regular
Yeah.
managers. So I think for this podcast, we mentioned to cover more remote working side. So I will
Yeah.
cover most of that. Um, I do think the most essential thing, I mean, important in general, is being there and listening. But we all know that. So I think at a more practical levels, I think it takes an additional effort as a manager when you have a remote team to manage. Simple as that. Because there are some aspects that you must have, under control, and you need some feedback back from your team, in regular intervals. And you don't have those coffee moments at the office where maybe you can grasp, how things are going. Hey, what did you do this weekend, etc. Unless you make an additional effort, right? So in my view, what managers have to do is again having a sort of set or semi set framework which they can utilize with their team members, have in place a number of weekly touch points or bi weekly touch points, and follow up with their team members in general. I mean, this sounds a bit obvious, but I've been in couple of organizations where this wasn't really structured, and I was actually missing from senior managers, so my managers, let's say. So I do think that these aspects are quite key. And also on another note, when we do work remotely, we are so much involved into work, work, and they're missing those, again, more informal times, because we also expect people to be, always okay, click on off, like, right, like a PPC campaign, let's say, that you can just jump into the work. And I still think that you can already, see that something is missing, and the shift to remote also meant, yeah, productivity is better, but also those moments are missing. So I think where I'm getting at is that what one manager should have is balance, in my opinion, in the way he manages the team, plus having a structured approach that helps him with that, and have regular check-ins with a team member. And then, we can go now in different directions, but I think these are my main points that I think are key there.
I think you're right because the flow in an organization when you are not working remotely is different. There are those coffee moments, walking towards the canteen, walking back from the canteen, where you can have those more informal conversations. But when you're working remotely, you almost need to put in a best practice, contact team member on this time and talk about this thing. It's in a way, it makes you far more intentional, which could work to your advantage, but you need to put that in place.
Yeah, that's true. And at the same time, we have time zones, right, which are sometimes tricky. So I don't think it's bad to checking in any case, and
Mm.
even if it's just Slack. I remember one organization I work for, and the Slack was work only work essentially. There was not much, what we call the chit chat, right? Which again, I can understand. But then my first impression was, hey, that's missing. And sometimes having a separate, channel for just chit chat doesn't even work. So I'm not saying it's simple because I think every company has specific dynamics, time zones. Team members are maybe more relaxed, some are not so relaxed. It's a really down to the manager understanding his team and what works and what doesn't. So it requires a little extra effort, I would say. So yeah, you cannot just apply the same normal ways in a way.
Yeah. One of the most empowering conversations I had was with one of my managers, and I was new to the organization and had a one to one. And she asked me, what is your motivation? And it really threw me because it was one of my earlier jobs. I wasn't expecting to be asked that. And she had a piece of paper with all of these different types. And I was struggling to answer. And she said, okay, out of these, which ones motivate you and which don't? And it felt as if she was seeing me as a person and wanted to know me as a person. And it just made then conversations even about other things much easier because that dynamic had changed. I felt valued, I felt respected, and all of those things come from these types of conversations.
Yeah, this is an interesting aspect, and it also comes down to the former experience, right? Because I understand this person you mentioned probably she experienced on her own, right? So
Yeah.
this is part of the development and learning curve also of a manager, in fact. And I would say also being open and getting feedback, and it's important, right? Because you need to have an open conversation with the other person, in fact. And we're all new in a way to this new way, right? So yeah,
Yeah.
understanding is really key, but that's a nice angle.
So you talked about the importance of being open. Um, how do you encourage that? How do you encourage a team to be honest with you, challenge you even, maybe even, God forbid, say, no, I'm not doing that? How do you encourage that?
Yeah, that's another nice topic. I think that comes down again to have trust first, because I think if you don't have any rapport whatsoever with a person working in your team, for you, under you, with you, etc., that's really going to be a challenge. And in terms of how do you encourage the having that open conversation, I would say that you can openly ask also about which way you prefer to communicate, which can be a bit off-putting, right, for some people. And we can make a nice segue to nationalities and international teams for this after. But in my experience, I've been in teams which were quite direct with communication. So let's say asking feedback and also receiving it both ways was quite relatively, I mean, quite simple. But then other teams or other people, team members, was a bit was more tricky. So I think managers should also be very sensible, or no, don't want to say sensitive, right? But sort of a little psychologist also in a way, because you should be able to sense and sort of detect, have an idea on what level of conversation or what kind of things the person is going to be comfortable sharing with me when it comes to work, and what maybe not. So this comes with time. So I think it's nice to have that sort of initial report. And for me, I suggest also, when someone is starting new, if you have the possibility, even it's going to be a remote position, go meet the team in person if you can. This really, really helps strengthen the rapport. Or maybe for the first month, come to the office 2 times in a month, something like that. Doesn't mean you'll work remotely after, let's say, it's fine. But for the first time, if you have the possibility, it's not too much of a geographical challenge, in Australia and the other one is in Europe. So if you can do it, I also strongly recommend. And that will more cement the rapport with your team and the manager. And then I think it comes with time. Some people will be very open and also more keen to conversation, and communication will be flowing nicely. Some others will be a bit more slower, perhaps. And again, it depends what the journey has been. And I've seen quite a few differences. Sometimes it's not tricky, because people might not share with you all the details, and you don't know the background, and again, you're missing those coffee conversations, right? So which are key many times.
Mm.
So I would say, yeah, there's not a simple easy recipe, I'm afraid. It's more of being open and communicating, and trying to also be there when there's some maybe need that you're not planning. So a bit of convoluted answer here, convoluted answer. But what I'm trying to get is that it's not a simple science, the communication, and I think you can refine it with time, and the team members can be, some will give you more feedback than others. So
So, how would a manager handle if feedback isn't the thing that they're expecting? So, you said earlier you can ask how people like to communicate. What if the answer doesn't sit well with you, or the feedback you've requested doesn't sit well with you? How would a manager handle that, especially if they've never met that person?
yeah, I think you should be as gentle and delicate as possible, um, because I think also people use also the screen as a barrier in a way. So
Mhm.
I mean, it can be both good and bad, right? Because you could be sort of protecting yourself from being too direct, but at the same time, one could be too direct. So it could be the two extremes. So I think that you need to be, yeah, careful as a manager again, but don't be shy to ask equally, because I find that if you don't ask, also the person might not reveal. So I had one of my old team members. I found out that she loved, it was, well, a girl in the team, that she loved the direct feedback, and I thought she didn't like direct feedback. And the only way I could find out was for me asking. And you can be, a little casual about it, but also go to the point and just say, hey, look, for me it's good to know what's the best way to deliver feedback to you, because we want to be effective, and I want to do something which you appreciate, right? That it's working for you. So what type of feedback do you like to receive? And then the person will say one thing or the other. And I was thinking at lunch earlier on this aspect. And sometimes you might have a new team member, which is maybe new. They're off just being a intern, right? And maybe they never had feedback, so they don't know the type of feedback they prefer. So one interesting way to approaching this could be, okay, you've never had any managers before. It could be, right, a new person, younger, and you can suggest, look, we will start this now with the management, meetings and one-on-ones, etc. 1 week I will give you direct feedback. 1 week I will give you indirect feedback, and 1 week I will give you something maybe neutral in the middle. And then we will, meet again, and you will tell me which one you prefer, which one will maybe was too much for you, and then we take it from there. So this could also be a way to to be sort of gentle and starting fresh with a person which effectively don't know and didn't have that experience. So although I'm kind of guessing that most people will know what they prefer, right? But still,
Mm.
I think that could be also an interesting approach.
They might know what they what they prefer, but they might not be able to say. Whereas if you create that framework of, let's test this, let's test that, and then we'll see where we go. So that's a really interesting way of
Yeah, and
looking
it
at it. I've
could be
never
that
thought of
you have
that.
different team members, and I mean, it does require, when you think about it, more effort, right, from a manager, because you might have one team member prefers more direct feedback, the other one maybe not so direct. So again, this require an additional level of effort, but I think it can really pay off. I mean, if you have a very large team, that comes tricky, but keep a spreadsheet or something, right? You can still
Mm.
organize yourself.
Yeah. Oh, well, look, lots of great tips already. And I'm really looking forward to the conversations we're going to be having after the break. But we'll have a short break now and be back shortly.
Hello everyone, Sarah here. Just want to give you a heads up that Google Podcasts will be discontinued at some point in the new year. If you are currently using Google Podcasts, don't fret. You can still listen to our episodes in lots of different ways. We're available on all the podcast playing apps such as Spotify, Apple, Amazon. You can also listen to episodes via our web player on our website. Loads of different ways. In the show notes, there'll be a link to our website and a link to all the directories where you can subscribe. Why should you subscribe? Well, you get notifications when new episodes are available. Hey, Sarah here from the SEO Mindset. Just a quick message to say if you would like to support the podcast, if you love what me and Tazmin are doing, then please do head on over to the seomindset.co.uk/donate. I'll make sure there's a link in this episode show notes, and that will take you to our Buy Me a Coffee page. So here you can buy us as many coffees as you like to support us. So each coffee is a donation, and also you can leave us a message, so that will make it easy for us to give you a shout out. Also, if you would like to reach out to us, maybe you want to say hello, ask us a question, request a shout out, maybe you want to come on as a guest, we have Twitter. Yes. So again, if you head on over to the seomindset.co.uk/Twitter. Again, I'll put a link in the show notes. That's how you can reach out to us, both me and Tazmin. So yes, thank you very much.
So, welcome everyone, and I hope you had time to make a cup of tea or get something nice to drink. But we are back talking about how managers can foster some really great relationships with their teams. So, Gabrio, how would a manager be mindful of energy levels? You talked about remote teams, time zones. What is your advice on that?
Yes, another interesting one. I think this one specifically is not very much discussed. I mean, I don't think many people talk about this. I've not seen, and I follow LinkedIn and other outlets quite a lot. So energy levels is an interesting one because, especially with international teams, you will most likely encounter team members in different time zones, right? And let's say when it's in Europe, it's not so bad. Maybe we have 1 or 2 hours and we're kind of more or less morning and then afternoon, and it's the same. But when you start having, people in the US, Australia, etc., or other countries in Asia, and let's not forget the rest of the world, it can become tricky. So your morning might be evening of another person, and when you're just starting work, the other person is maybe half of his day and just getting off. So I think this is another interesting aspect, and when possible and feasible, I will try to synchronize time zones, at least on, let's say, sort of similar parts of the day. Or also what you could do is to just again, as earlier saying on the communication, ask your team members when, if especially if someone is with significant amount of hours from you, let's say 6 hours plus 7 6, you could ask them when is the time of the day you perform the best, because some people might work better in the evening and maybe works great with your time zone in the morning. So that's great. So again, I would try to have that conversation, especially when you as a manager know that you have a large gap in time zone, and try to sort of make it work, and also think about maybe don't do meetings on Fridays, on those type of things when it's late for the other team members. So, and the reason for this is that again, energy levels vary a lot, so you might hear also in the tone of voice that one person is very energetic in the morning, and then the rest of the team is already afternoon, evening, and they are on the kind of quiet side. And the final tip on this specific one is that if you cannot really find a window of time which kind of is balanced, you can also resort to some offline async videos, right? I know it's not ideal, you don't get that back-to-back feedback loop, but platforms such as Loom or a couple of others are really good. I use that a lot when you have small notes, or also people in different time zones that just can't make it. So again, there are just some time zones which are just plain impossible to do. And yeah, I think again, you should try to adjust and make things sort of align. It gets more complicated when it's a client meeting, right? And
Yeah.
that one you just have to suck it up and do it. That's the bottom line. So I think that for the most part, when it comes to at least the team meetings, your internal trainings and those type of things, that you also expect people to have attention, right? If I'm training 10 people, I would like them to be kind of awake at the meeting and not falling asleep halfway. So yeah, I think that's one way of doing it. And once again, it does put a bit of more sense of responsibility on the manager, and I think that's kind of the direction where we're going here with the conversation, that especially managing a remote team, it does take additional effort from a manager. But a good part is that if you do a couple of small tweaks to your management style, I think it really pays off, because after all, people appreciate the time, and also appreciate, I think, you checking in. I don't think anybody will dislike that you'll ask them when is the time of the day you're most productive. I think it's a nice question, and also will improve your relationship with your colleagues. So it's a win-win in my book.
Yeah, and it's growth for the manager as well, which is always good. So, leading from that, you talked about being mindful of energy levels. How can a manager be mindful of cultural differences of remote teams?
Yes, I think this one, I have to say, this one comes down to experience. That's one thing which will really help, and you cannot really train experience other than experiencing things, right? So I do think that, again, communicating and, doing some research on communication style can help if you didn't have the experience. So you can perhaps research on the style of communication for that specific country. If you have many team members in country X, people are very direct or indirect. And I could make one example of the Netherlands, our Dutch friends. So I worked there for a while, and people in Netherlands, everybody knows they're very, very direct. And for me, as an Italian, formerly working in the UK and other few European countries, was quite an adjustment, because it's seriously direct. So sometimes you might simply go, "Hey, did you do this? Where is it the report?" Sort of not even asking how are you, etc. Which you know, when you have things to do in a short amount of time is great, but at other times can feel a bit extreme, right? Especially when you're not used to. So for me that was quite the adjustment, and ironically it's also being an adjustment in a reverse now, because now I'm based in Croatia, so, and I'm working with more international teams and clients, and I have to rewind back from that directness, which was too much for the non-Dutch customers, clients, and my people I'm helping online as well. So sometimes I have to remind myself, Gabrio, don't be too much direct, because in emails, for
Okay.
instance, with some countries and people from certain countries, it can not go well, and you have to do a bit of more introduction and doesn't mean you'll write email half a A4 paper just asking how are you, no, but just some common how are you, which again from certain countries feel normal, but then others are not so much. So how to be mindful is, I think, understanding, a, you have team members from 10 nationalities, yes. B, what can you do about it? C, do you know enough to do something, or do you have to ask? And
Mhm.
so these are some steps I would put in place. And I mean, if everything is great, maybe you don't have to do anything. But I'm pretty sure you have experienced some situations, or where you request something and it didn't really go according to plan, or other communication was not flowing. I think there's a interesting phrase which I read in one of things going around online. When in the UK, and please correct me if I'm wrong on this one, when you say someone tells you something and you say, "Oh, that's very interesting," you don't really mean that's interesting, right? It's just a way to say like, "Okay, let's move on." But for
Yeah.
the Dutch, they think it's really interesting, and they will
Yeah.
experience the conversation in a different way. And unless you've read it, and there's a great book I always recommend, The Culture Map, from Erin Meyers, and she talks about these things brilliantly. So actually, for all managers, grab a copy of that book. You can find it online. It's amazing. And she talks about these things. She's an international coach on these type of things, helping CEOs and founders of companies, etc., that have international teams. So I've read that one. So that was already a big help. So yeah, I just remember that. So sorry, I went a bit long here. So do you agree on the interesting thing in UK?
Yeah, I do, because it's, you don't want to say it's you're wrong or you're right, but you're just trying to get to the next stage of the conversation,
Exactly. Yeah.
politely, without causing offense. Um, but yes, yes, I do. You know what? I think you said this, talking about energy levels and cultural differences in remote teams isn't spoken about a lot, and I dare say you are right here. But
Yeah,
yeah, so
and
maybe
perhaps
you
is
can
yeah,
talk more about it.
yes. I mean, I will like how can I say, see some more people even thinking about it. And especially when you think, hey, why certain team member is not performing sometimes, or you expect them to be online at a certain hour of the day. So I mean, with remote teams, you are most of the time adjusting that people will answer you in different times of the day. But I think some people still don't get it, so you have to say it in that time, in that aspect. Or it could be something to mention, right? So for example, sometimes I do good work in the evening. It's quiet,
Yeah,
and my wife is an early bird instead. So yeah, so I'm not too much fan of, say, really early morning meetings. Although if I have to do, I'll do them.
yeah,
So then, if it's my manager, he might ask me, "Hey, Gabriel, where do you prefer to have a one-on-one?" So I'll say, maybe in the afternoon, like 3 o'clock is a good time for me. So, and
yeah,
that's kind of what you could do with your team when you're talking to them and doing one-on-ones, right? So
yeah,
again, of course, time schedules, of course, it's not always possible to have everything perfect. But in an
yeah.
ideal world, you can at least make an effort. And if you can adjust to some more pleasant time zones, and why not? That's my whole point there. And
Yeah, absolutely. I think we need to probably do another podcast episode on this topic on its own. It's really
yeah,
great.
happy to.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we've run out of time, so I just wanted to ask you some questions that we normally ask our guests here. One of the questions is, what is the best career advice you've ever received?
I think would be, failure is one way to succeed, if not the
Oh,
only way to succeed. Because especially when you're starting up, or you have something new you're building on your own, that will help you understand where you want to go.
Yeah, brilliant, brilliant. And who is somebody, and it doesn't have to be in the SEO world, who is somebody who inspires you?
That will be my wife. Yeah, my wife Lorraine. Sometimes we go through situations together, and also, well, she came from a different country than me, and when I noticed that sometimes she will appreciate things which I don't appreciate. Simple things. So she's very thankful and have always a positive outlook for things, and I think we could all use that sometimes. And yeah, she always has a smile, so that will be my inspirational.
That's a brilliant answer. And if you are messing up the kitchen, you can say, "Look, I mentioned you on the podcast, so you've got
Yeah.
you've got
That's
a
right.
point there."
That's
Um,
right.
if somebody wants to talk to you more about these topics, what's the best place for them to reach you?
Well, will be LinkedIn is a good start, or they can always email me at info@gabriolinari.com. Those two are the best ones.
And we'll put all the links in the show notes as well. So that leaves me nothing to do except, thank you so much for this. It's been great fun talking to you. It's great fun talking to you even before we recorded. And to thank everyone who's listening, and to remind them as well that if they would like to support Sarah, what we're trying to do with this podcast, then there are various ways that you can do that. One of them is to donate via the Buy Me a Coffee link, and please follow us on Twitter or X. But thank you so much, Gabrio. Thank you.
Thank you again for your time, and I had a really good time as well.
Excellent.